Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we have such an awesome collaboration here, and I'm ecstatic to get this thing started. So, as you know, I've touched on the LA Kings in previous videos regarding the LA Kings as having one of the brightest futures in all the NHLs, me alongside Gio, Lego Rocks 99. You know the drill there, but we had a great conversation, and then I was reached out by an individual that really enjoyed my video and wanted to make a collaboration happen. Not just one, but we're going to be doing two different videos, and this is the first one regarding the LA Kings and who the next face of the franchise for them is going to be. Is it as clear cut as, say, a guy like Quinton Byfield, or are other prospects, whether it's Alex Turcotte among others, going to be making a good run for that position over these next couple of years? I'm not sure, but that's what we will be breaking down in today's video. So be alongside myself and get ready for this. The guy who is in fact the voice of Barry. You might know him from, yes, the TV show The Jellies by Tyler the Creator. You can find it on Adult Swim. It's a great cartoon. You might also recognize him from Showtime's I'm Dying Up Here, and you can also find him as well in multiple roast battles for Comedy Central over these past couple of years. And he has his own podcast called Inappropriate. Earl is going to be myself alongside, yes, the one, the only comedian and actor and a great individual, and Earl Skakel. And this is going to be so fun. I can't wait to get in this video, guys. We're going to have a great conversation regarding the Kings, and we're going to be doing another video as well that will probably be up either a day or two after this one is. So make sure you stay till the end of this video to find out all the deets and all of our thoughts regarding the LA Kings and who exactly is going to be, yes, the next face of the franchise. All right, hey Earl, thanks so much again for coming on. This is awesome. I can't wait to get in this conversation. But if you want to give another rundown about yourself, besides, you know, being awesome and all the accolades that you have, seriously, go ahead. And really, what made you become a hockey fan?
Sure. My name is Earl Skakel. You may have seen me on Comedy Central's Roast Battle, or I'm Dying Up Here on Showtime. Currently on Adult Swim, has the voice of Barry Jelly, the patriarch of the Jellies. I'm the only white guy in the cartoon. Real Rob on Netflix. If you've ever been to LA to the Comedy Store, you've seen me there too. And obsessed with my favorite pro wrestler, Kamala, the Ugandan giant. What got me into hockey is very strange. Living in LA, you'd think I'd be a Kings fan initially, but the King games in the 80s weren't on television. So the Ranger games were, and I became obsessed with a player by the name of Barry Beck, and been a lifelong fan since.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's really cool too how, like, you were telling me earlier before we started the video, how you were like basically a closet Ranger fan growing up. And obviously me being as a Ranger fan too, I think that's cool because I know that Beck obviously finished off his career with the LA Kings, I believe, and it's pretty cool how everything kind of come full circle. And now that you actually know him on social media, that's pretty awesome.
Well, he was just so much bigger than everyone. Now, this is the late 70s. I think he came to the Rangers in 79. Came to the Kings in 87. But, you know, back then, if you were 6'3", 210 pounds, you were one of the top 3 or 4 bigger players in the league. You know, now that would make you one of the top 3 or 4 bigger guys on your team. So it was just, and he had this big afro, and you know, he was good at everything. He was like a bigger Scott Stevens. You know, he could shoot. No one wanted to fight him. He was tough, skilled. So I really just gravitated toward him, and then little by little got into you know, the Kings when they started televising their games a little bit more, and then I, you know, started going to their games at the Forum, and so I've been a King fan since before Gretzky came here, you know, and it always bummed me out that the Kings had some really good teams in the 80s, but no one really cared because this was, unfortunately for them, you also had the Showtime Lakers at the exact same time with, you know, Kareem and Magic and Jamal Wilkes and
No
Bob
shame
McAdoo.
there.
Yeah, so you're like competing against, you know, just this giant entertainment option of the Lakers, and especially how they played, which was very fast break, run and gun. So, you know, the Kings didn't really get going till, you know, Gretzky came on board.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think what you have to do here though, before we even go forward, is just tell people what exactly your hockey jersey collection is, and then I will pull up the photo.
Well, it's kind of directly related to my comedy career. When I first started stand up way back when, I had tremendous stage fright. Even though all my friends who were in the entertainment industry, they were all assistants to big managers, and some were even agents at that point at the big agencies. They were like, dude, you're the funniest person we know. Just get into comedy and we'll help you. So, I little by little got into comedy, but I'm still very, very scared because it's one thing to make your friends laugh. It's another thing to make a room full of strangers laugh.
I can
So
only
I
imagine.
thought it's because your friends know you. So, but someone who just paid a 2-drink minimum and $20 for the date and themselves, it's almost $100. So it's like, make me laugh. So I just put a lot of pressure on myself. So I was like, what can I do to mentally take some of that pressure off? And I thought, what if I wore game worn jerseys of tough guys? And like I would put the jersey on and it would be almost like a shield. So that's why I started collecting game worn hockey jerseys of fighters. And I have a second bedroom that is filled to capacity with shirts of guys like Barry Beck, Bob Probert, Dave Manson, and about 100 other tough guys you've never heard of. But now I don't wear the jerseys anymore on stage because I don't have quite the stage fright I used to. So if there's anyone out there listening who wants about 700 game worn jerseys, contact me.
I'll put that in the description down below, guys. You heard it here first. But just to give you guys an idea when it comes to his collection, and he's obviously been fortunate enough, has had plenty of great interactions with former hockey players along in his podcast, which I'll have available in the description too, Inappropriate Earl. You've had guys on, as you mentioned, Theo Fleury and Dustin Penner. Like, what was that experience like, just in a nutshell? And then I'm going to show the photo of Dustin in the hockey vault.
Well, you couldn't have picked two more opposite feeling interviews. Obviously Theo Fleury was just a very sad story. And a lot of non-hockey fans don't know, but he was essentially involved in a Jerry Sandusky situation of hockey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to mention the guy's name. I don't think people realize that. I know you know this, but like in hockey, these kids leave home at 14, 15 years old, and they're put
exactly.
up, what they're called in Canada, billet family homes. And, the parents don't know what the hell is going on most of the time because they're hundreds of miles away. And I think some junior coaches take advantage of that and do things they shouldn't be doing. So that's basically what, his manager reached out to me and said, hey, because he was in a documentary he had just made. It's like, we'd love to come on your podcast. We're doing ESPN. We're doing, Fox. You got 20 minutes. I'm like, well, you have to come to my house. He's like, you got 15 minutes. So he came to my house,
wow.
With a team full of publicists. And I was starstruck just because I hated him as a King fan, mainly from his Calgary days, not so much his Ranger days. And, it was a sad interview, but he was so nice. And I took him up to the jersey room and, took a picture with him in the jersey room. And he's like, dude, I've won Stanley Cups. I've played hockey all over the world. I've never seen anything like this room. And so that was he. And then on the opposite side, in terms of just the feeling of the interview, Dustin Penner came over, and he's a big guy. Like, I'll guess he's 6'4", 225, maybe a little more. Comes over with this German police dog who's running all over my house. And he would only respond to Dustin if Dustin spoke German to him. So it's like, he'd be like, "Uns and the dog would just drop. And he was great. He did about a 2-hour interview with me. At some point, he stops the interview and go, "Hey, I got this hot babe. She's going to pick up the dog." And so this beautiful girl comes in like a playmate or something and takes the police dog away. And Dustin took his shoes off and just plopped them up on my table. And like anyone else did that, I'd be like, "Hey, dude, like, you know, this ain't your house." But he was awesome. He was very funny, and we still keep in touch. And you know, it was an honor to have both. You know, it's pretty neat to say you've had two guys at your house who've won Stanley Cups.
Yeah, exactly. Especially ones that, for your case, and I think most hockey fans can agree, I've looked up to a certain extent. So here, I'm pulling up the photo now so everyone can see. This is Dustin, and I'm just gonna actually fix this real quick because I have you in the way. That's fine. I'll just leave you there. But that's Dustin, and I know that you're still in the frame. Actually, you know what? I might pause the video real quick and fix this. Hold on. Okay. All right, so you guys can see we have Dustin here, and I took him out of the frame momentarily. And behind him is just a glimpse of that hockey jersey collection. That is ridiculous. Like, it's one thing to have Dustin Penner in your home. It's another to have him standing in front of 700 game-worn jerseys. Ridiculous. So I cannot get over that by any stretch of the imagination. And seriously, the fact that you got the opportunity to not just, you know, meet him and do an interview, but let alone do like 2+ hours, and basically this guy comes in your home comfortable, you know, it's no sweat to him. It's basically like, "Oh, hey, what's up, buddy? We're gonna do this." Like that's a surreal experience, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. I think if I could give myself a tap on the shoulder for my interviewing style, I don't, you know, because I'm around celebrities every night.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the last 8 months, but you know, when the world was normal, you know, I'd be at the Comedy Store, and one night you see Jim Carrey, and the next night you see Joe Rogan, you know, David Spade. So like, I treat them like humans. So I think if you can interview them like it's just like you and I right now, they like that. You know, mm-hmm. I mean, you know, Dustin Penner, Fleury, Sean Avery, they know they're famous. So yeah. I don't think you have to.
You don't need to remind them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, I think that's what got me on the cartoon with Tyler was, like I told you, I didn't know who he was. Like, I'm a metalhead. You know, I could tell you who the third drummer in Kiss was, but you know, at that point in time, if you asked me to name a Tyler the Creator song, I'd be stumped. So I think they like it when you just treat them like they're normal.
As you should. You know, I wouldn't see why not. I can understand the starstruck kind of phase at first, maybe. Maybe you got to keep it internal just because, yes, they're human beings, but at the end of the day, they have a reputation for a reason, and you clearly have a connection to that probably for like a majority of your life. And, you know, they obviously don't know that, but because so many people are in the same shoes as you.
Well, I think the one funny thing about the Fleury interview was I thought, okay, I know this is going to be a pretty serious, albeit short episode. So I actually he fought Eric Cairns, who was a giant of a man when he was with the Rangers, and Eric, who started with the Rangers, was with the Islanders. It was the Islander-Ranger War. And I had the jersey of Eric Cairns, so I laid it on the couch. And he kind of looked at me like, what does this have to do with me? I'm like, dude, you've had your hands on that jersey before. So he kind of laughed. You know, I don't think he quite understood that, you know, it was a game-worn jersey at first. And when I took him upstairs, he was like, okay, I get it now. Yeah,
no, that's sick. Seriously, I'm very, very jealous, obviously, but an amazing experience to have, I'm sure. But all right, well, we're at the 14-minute mark. I think it's about time we start talking about this LA Kings team, shall we? Okay, so
absolutely.
All right, so the Canes, you know, you obviously reached out to me because you enjoyed my previous Canes video, and seriously, thank you again. That really means a lot. But I'm really excited to talk to you about, you know, who exactly the next face of the franchise is going to be for them, because it's easy to pick the poster boy essentially now in the second overall pick in Quinton Byfield, and I wouldn't be doubting anyone that would feel that way. But is it really that clear cut? Because when you look at this Canes prospect pool, and as I've touched on in the past with Gio Lego Rocks 99, you know, the Canes have one of the best prospect pools in the entire NHL. And all these guys are surely not going to pan out. It just doesn't seem likely. It's very rare that every prospect lives up to the potential, even though you want them to be. So when you have not just Quinton Byfield, but you also have 2019 first round pick and Alex Turcotte, a guy that I think the Chicago Blackhawks are going to regret not picking up. I know that Kirby Dach's been good, but the Chicago boy, when I saw him get past Chicago when they took Dach, I was like, are you serious? Like, you really did him dirty. Then he goes to the rival in the Canes. I think that really put a fire under him, in my personal opinion. But then you have him, and then you have other guys as well, whether it's Gabriel Vilardi, who really has such an amazing story, given the hardships that he's dealt with in his young career, injury-wise. And then I think Samuel Fagemo is another guy that you could really put in that discussion as to, okay, these guys are all expected to have serious impacts in this Kings lineup.
Oh, I mean, there's definitely more than Byfield that could be the face. You know, you look at a guy, they have so many prospects, you don't even bring up Arthur Kaliyev. Like,
yeah, exactly. And he just blew over my head. I was talking about him earlier today in my previous video at the time of recording this, at least. And he's fantastic too. Throw him in there. He definitely needs to be thrown in there, no question.
I mean, he could be, you know, LA is an entertainment, obviously based city. There's a lot to do. You know, you have 2 football teams, you have 2 basketball teams, you have essentially 2 baseball teams.
Yep.
Even though the Angels are they're not necessarily in LA, but, you know, I guess you still compete with them for some fans' dollars. You know, you have 3, well, actually, you could almost say 3 baseball teams, with San Diego being the Padres being relatively close by, and obviously you're in the entertainment capital of the world. So a player like Kaliyev, he's going to be a goal scorer. You know, he's going to be entertaining to watch.
For sure.
But I still say that Byfield is, like we were talking about before, he just hits every check mark you want in someone who for the next 10 plus years you want getting people into that arena, hopefully soon. You know, he's good looking. He's got that smile. In terms of his hockey ability, he's big, he's fast.
He's so fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he doesn't get enough credit for. I think, you know, there were, I don't want to say rumors, but debates on, you know, should we get Stützle? Who's very flashy, and I could have seen him in LA being the face just because he's a very flashy player. But I just
would have liked him considering he's German.
Yeah, no, I mean, he just that last name, I could see some marketing opportunities at you know, we have restaurants out here that are horrible called Der Wiener Schnitzel, and it's just like the worst fast food ever. And maybe they could have done something with a Stützle hot dog or something. But Byfield is just, you know, he's almost like a Lindros, where not in terms of the exact playing style, but like Lindros was very marketable because the way he played, and he was a good looking kid. And I just see Byfield as being a minority hockey player. I think he's the highest drafted minority African-American player ever.
I believe that's correct too. Yeah.
I mean, it would either be him or someone who's picked number 1, and I don't think there's ever been an African American number 1 selection. So
I don't believe so.
Yeah, he's almost like a bigger version of a Ginla.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I can see a lot of similarities there. Not as much necessarily with the physicality, but I think he's going to grow into it. You know, if there's one critique that we've seen with Byfield, it has been, say, him not using his size to his full capability yet, in the sense of he still has plenty of growing to do. You know, he's 6'4", 6'5", but he's going to put on more pounds. He's going to have more of a physical game. Naturally, it's not that he necessarily needs it, because he definitely doesn't. But I think especially being an LA King, and not to branch off to something completely foreign here, but staying centered on this topic. When you think of the LA Kings, and I've touched on this in my previous videos, from the early 2000s and in their run in the 2010s and 2012, 2014, they were the big bad Canes. They were, in my mind, the Bruins of the West. You know, that forward group, especially, they were all big. That center depth between Carter and Kopitar, especially, they were massive, and they were able to get physical when need be. It wasn't an issue for them, and they also had the skill behind it. A prime Jeff Carter is a fantastic player, and same thing with Andrzej Kopitar, the captain. So I think when you bring Byfield in the scenery, it really checks off all the boxes again, because the LA Kings already have a familiarity with that kind of style, if you will. But now they have a guy that has the skills that surely should be above both those players, given how good they've still been in both Kopitar and Carter. I think Byfield, he's going to grow into his body more. But if he gets more of those physicality traits, then I think that comparison with Iginla can definitely be more prominent. But I see a lot of similarities as it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only question mark is it's such a gigantic jump from junior hockey. I don't think he'll ever play in the AHL. I think you guys said that.
Yeah, no way. No way he's playing the AHL, in my opinion.
So, to go from juniors to the NHL is it's a gigantic leap, because everything's bigger, everything's faster, the pace of play, the size of the players. I mean, he's been dominant against teenagers, with acne on their face.
Yep.
And I said this in regards to Vilardi. I did a podcast 2 years ago where, it was my turn to talk, and we were talking about Vilardi, and I was like, my only question is, what happens when he goes into the corners that first time with, say, a Zdeno Chara? And everyone was like, well, in terms of Vilardi, well, he's not going to be playing on the first line. So I'm like, okay, well, how about with a Kevin Bieksa? You don't have Kevin Biexas in the juniors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point.
So, I mean, they have big, tough players in juniors, but Kevin Bieksa knows right where to cross-check you, right where there's no padding. He knows where to slash you. And so that's really the only
dirty, you might as well be good at it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so that's, I think, really my only question with Byfield is, okay, you can run over guys in Sudbury, but what happens that first shift when you go in the corners against, say, a Tom Wilson?
Yeah.
There's no Tom Wilsons playing in the OHL.
He's going to get a reality check.
Yeah, and it's how he will react to that. And even though I'm sure he's more than capable of defending himself, I think for the first time he'll have a guy like a Curtis McDermott to step in and go, you're not hitting him.
Yeah.
If you do, you got to fight me.
Mm-hmm.
So that may help him because the Kings have a fairly big team. But, I still, when that's the only, it's like, that's me forcing myself to say a negative about him. Because
exactly.
I really don't. You're like, it's like if someone gives you a Ferrari as a present, you got to say something bad. Well, I guess it's going to cost a lot. I'll deal with that problem. I just don't see any negatives with this kid. Of course, the only potential negative is playing in Los Angeles. There's a lot of distractions. And, I've seen it a lot in the world of comedy where, you take a young comic who, say, comes here from Idaho or a small town, and they get to the bright lights of LA and they kind of fall into some bad habits, just because it's the nightlife here is amazing and the potential bad elements are 100-fold. It's almost like when Derek Bugard went to New York. Minnesota's a smaller American city. He was from Saskatchewan. Now he's in Manhattan by himself.
Yep.
And we know what I mean. I'm not comparing them, but he's probably never been in a huge city like this. So that's really the only area of concern I would have is how he handles that.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine too, because when you look at most Kings players, I think like there really hasn't been anything that crosses my mind, and besides the obvious Mike Richards, if you will, like that's really like the only like clear thing that stands out to me, or from like a Rangers side of things. I know that there were things in the past, not so much while he was a Ranger in a short time, but Ryan Malone, there were some things with him. Chris Arnott during his time as well, because I actually remember the Rangers were going in. I believe they had a signing in place with Arnott, but then I'm pretty sure, it backtracked because he failed his drug test. It was something along those lines. I remember that happening years ago in the early 2010s. But, these things happen, but I think Byfield's going to be just fine in that market. I think he's going to thrive in it. They're basically passing the torch to him, if you will. There's so many reasons to be excited as a Canes fan. I can only imagine what your reaction was, for instance. So let's break down real quick, if we don't mind. What was your reaction? Because I'm sure you watched the draft lottery when it happened, to see the Canes get in that top 3 and then end up landing that second overall pick, when the Canes weren't originally in a position to get that, because they were rolling towards the end of the season when they had guys like Vilardi and why am I blanking on the other player's name? Oh shoot, I don't know.
Frick.
Why. Yes, thank you. Who got the hardest slap shot in the AHL? That was sick. But what was your reaction to when they won the lottery? Because I'm sure you had to have been ecstatic.
Oh, sure. I mean, I will say this. I understand why the lottery's in place, because I think back in the late 80s and early 90s, you did have teams tanking, like you knew.
Purposely tanking, yes.
Oh, I get it. You want to keep the integrity of the game. I remember one year I thought the Penguins were tanking to get Lemieux because, like, Jay Caulfield was playing on the first line power play one game. I'm like, all right, man, you got to cover it up a little better than this.
Lemieux saved the franchise.
Yeah,
he literally did. They were literally going to relocate, and then Lemieux came in the picture.
Yeah, no, I understand why teams wanted to tank to get Lemieux and then Yager but the Kings kind of got, I don't want to swear on this, but they got effed over last year. I thought they were the worst team in the league. I mean, they were just bad.
Yeah, no, they were.
And I'm a big King fan. I probably dabble a little bit in homerism, but I'm pretty realistic. They should have gotten the first pick. I think they picked 5th with Turcotte. So they didn't lose too bad, but I was ecstatic because I thought, okay, finally we got some luck in the draft. We probably shouldn't have gotten Byfield or pick number 2. Detroit, they need help.
Yeah, I agree. I as a Rangers fan, I was like, I'm ecstatic right now. I cannot believe this. I still feel terrible for the Canes and the Senators. Like, I'm glad that I wasn't the one that, had this come to fruition when the guy especially dropped the Rangers ball. There's good arguments to be had to say that, okay, yeah, maybe that was rigged a little bit. But, that's just a discussion for another day. Yeah, I see your point, though. Regardless of the situation, you're right. The Canes weren't in that position to really land that top 3 pick. So for them to do it and to really get a guy who would have been a first overall pick in the couple of years prior, I think Byfield definitely would have made the case to be first overall in the 2019 draft, even with Kakko and Hughes, no doubt in my mind. This was just an Alexei Lafreniere draft and then everyone else.
I mean, I'm of the opinion, and this is controversial, and of course, we're talking about 2 18-year-olds, so it's like, that's why I think the NHL draft is so hard to prognosticate the future, because like we were talking about off air, when the Kings drafted Dan Gratton in 1985, I thought this kid's going to be a star. I mean, he was OHL, he scored, he fought, he played 7 games in the NHL. I don't think that's going to happen with either kid drafted, Lafreniere or Byfield, but I could see Byfield being the better player in 10 years. I think the Rangers, Lafreniere is the better player now. And of course, we're just guessing. But, the Kings finally got some luck, and, they probably got a little bit of luck last year getting Turcotte at 5. So I was ecstatic because I just think that, Byfield, and there was some debate or arguments amongst LA hockey fans and scouts in general. Do you want Byfield? Do you want Stützle? And I was like, hey, the Kings literally cannot F this draft up, because either one's going to be a star.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from a marketing standpoint, I'm glad they went with Byfield because you can't pass on him. He just, there's nothing wrong with this kid on the surface unless he's got some problems that I don't know about. Like there's just, he's got the kind of pizzazz of PK Subban with the suits and the bow ties. And, I just think he's going to be the face of this franchise. And he's the perfect heir apparent to Kopitar. Not to say that Turcotte and Vilardi aren't either, but that's a good problem to have when you're going, well, it could be any one of the three. But I just think Byfield is a marketer's dream.
Yeah, and we'll break down some of those other names too to really give the consideration at least. But to touch on a couple things that you said, well, one starting with Lafreniere, that's a very fair point to have, and obviously we both might have a slight bias with being Rangers and Canes fans as to who we think maybe is going to have the promising future down the road, and that's fine. I think when it comes to things now, Byfield would very well be in a better spot, in my personal opinion, if he used his body to his advantage in the way that Alexis Lafreniere does. Because that's one of the biggest aspects of his game, why he's so mature. Alexis smaller than Byfield, but he plays as if he is, say, 6'4", 6'5". He takes full advantage of his size. And that's something that he's really grown into this past year, which is really what helped make him that unanimous first overall pick. He's ridiculous. I don't know how else to put it. He's fantastic in every single thing he does. And winners don't get drafted very often first overall. So that was another thing that's so eye-opening about him. He has all the characteristics as a center while being a left winger. So I think when it comes to long-term, Byfield definitely has that opportunity, and it'll be a fun thing to track because everyone always tracks, the first and second overall pick. Last year it's Kakko and Hughes. They're going to be rivals, not just because it's the Devils and the Rangers, but because of that connection probably for the remainder of their career. Same thing to an extent can be said with guys like Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid. There are all those hypes and all those comparisons going in their draft. And then Patrick Laine, Austin Matthews, even though they're not the same type of skill player, they always do those kind of things. So Byfield may very well have that advantage in the sense of being a center. The opportunities can present themselves more to him when it comes to not just ice time, but also just all the type of situations he will be in on the ice because of the fact that he is a center and not a winger. So I think that is definitely a fair thing to add. But when it comes to the marketing standpoint too, you hit the nail on the head. He definitely has that chance to really be something that the Canes have never had before. This is a new wave, not just for the Canes, but for a lot of teams in the NHL that are having these great prospect pools and are really in an unprecedented time, not because of what's currently happening this year, but just with the talent year after year is getting better and better. We are seeing prospects develop like they never have because they're taking advantage of the things around them. Whether it's being able to use analytics more to say focus on little aspects of their game, or it's having more intense training. It's focusing on their meals better. It's not like what it was in the 80s, obviously. Like there's so many things that go into it. So when you look at the Kings now, if they say had the equivalent to the type of draft picks that they had and say, the early 2000s even, they wouldn't be in nearly as good of a spot as they are now because of just how great these prospects are developing.
Oh, I mean, just the modern technology in the medical fields, like with Kupri. I know we're not talking about him per se right now, but like,
no, it's fine. Go into it.
He has a torn ACL, and I have that same injury. Not to get myself in the discussion with Kings prospects, but
what it feels like.
Oh, absolutely. Like I had my surgery in 2006. I can't imagine the medical advances just in the last 14 years where when he had his surgery, how much better it was. And plus he's 18.
Yep.
His recovery will be almost as if he never had the injury. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the training techniques and
even look at Vilardi. I think he's definitely an even bigger example.
Absolutely.
Like the fact that he sustained a significant back injury, I believe, that even had certain people writing him off as to is he even going to have a sustained NHL career. He doesn't just recover fully. he makes a dramatic impact in his short stint with the Canes towards the end of last season, which I was really excited about. I think that's really promising. If there's one guy that stands out to me as maybe being that unsung face, to even though he isn't to the level of Byfield when it comes to his pure skill, Vilardi could be that guy for multiple reasons. One, he has that frame as well. He has great playmaking ability. He can shoot the puck well. We all know this. He has a defensively sound game too. I love centers that have a 200-foot game. That's so important to me for any forward, let alone a center especially. He has all that. He's healthy now. And he's also the first Kings prospect out of these guys to really be the first to step out and make an impact. So that might be an indication that, who knows, there's a reason why these other guys haven't played yet, either because they weren't drafted, among other things. But, he already has his foot in the door a little bit, which is already going to give him an advantage in camp going into next season. So I'm really excited about him regarding that aspect.
Oh, sure. I mean, the Kings have been kind of secretive in terms of Vilardi's back, and I get it. Like, I don't really have a reason to know the exact injury. Mm-hmm. But it seems, like you said, 2 years ago when I did that podcast, it was like, he may never play again. And then, a year later it was, well, he's skating a little bit. And now I think the back problems are manageable. And that probably has a lot to do with his age. A 20-year-old's recovery ability is pretty special.
Yeah, there's a time to get hurt, not that you want to get hurt. It's definitely now.
Oh, absolutely. I think with Kupri, it's like, I said this when it happened. I mean, obviously you wish it didn't happen, but if there's a time to tear your ACL, it's when you're 18. Yeah. Because with the training or the recuperability training methods that has access to, or it's like Trump getting the COVID medicine. Like he gets the best of the best, the best surgeons, the best physical fitness trainers, recovery specialists. So
you get the special treatment, rightfully so.
So I'm excited about it. That's another guy you don't really talk about, just because it's they have so much depth at center that like I told you via text, a guy like Anderson Dolan 2 years ago was like, this is our new Mike Richards. He's Mike Richards 2.0. And I could see him not making this team, like at least as a center.
And that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a cup of coffee with the Kings, I want to say 2 years ago. He played like a couple games, and it's like, okay, I get it. He made some nice plays, and you could tell he was a little green, but I was like, wow, I like what I see. And I mean, I think if he makes this team, it's going to be as a winger now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that also kind of segues too, and I'm going to break down some of the other prospects too in a second, but going back to the Byfield debate, if you will, I did a video a couple months ago basically comparing the two players in multiple aspects of their game and who would be the best fit second overall for the Canes. I led to the conclusion of Stützle just in the sense of his versatility, both being able to play the center position, but he can play the wing as well. So that was something that was leading me more towards why I think the Canes would make sense going down that route, because they already have significant center depth. They decide, no, we want Byfield. We feel more confident in him, and that's perfectly fine. I don't blame them at all for feeling that way. But now you look at this just plethora, and it's the same thing with the Ottawa centers too, and I've touched on that in my centers videos. They have so much great center prospects to the point where you got to imagine maybe at least one of these guys is going to be moving into the wing if they can handle it, whether it's a right wing with a left-handed shot, like what Kaliyev is currently, or, just a left wing with a left-handed shot, whatever it may be. I think that is something we could possibly see with the Kings in the future, because I don't expect them to say deal any of these guys away. These are all crucial parts of their development. Like Jack Hughes, for instance, too. He's been gaining time at the left wing when he is a centerman. So I think when it comes to their development, it's a great problem to have. Let's put it that way. When you have to try to figure out where to put these guys in your lap because you have too many of them, it's nothing to scoff at.
Oh, I mean, I totally agree. Like, they have multiple people who I think are going to have to go to a wing. It's like, this is just off the top of my aging memory, but Right now I would put the Kings center depth chart, and I'm including Kopitar. He's obviously the number one guy right now. You have Kopitar, Vilardi, assuming the back issues are taken care of. And then you've got, Turcotte, Madden, Thomas, Kupri, Anderson Dolan, Dudas. He's probably a long shot, but he's still a prospect. That's 8 centers. I could see Thomas going to wing.
I could definitely see Thomas going to wing too. Yeah.
I mean, I see him as out of all those guys I listed, Madden and Turcotte, I think they'll be given shots at center first. And this is no inside information, but I could see the Kings saying to Thomas, "We'd like to see it wing, see what you got there."
Yeah.
Because it's just, I think you're wasting Thomas. If you want him at center, he'd probably right now be at best the 4th line center. And I think that's wasting him. That's some 4th line center you could give to Amadio if he even makes the team, which I don't know where he's going to play now, but, there's just I don't recall a team having this many prospects at all.
Let alone having so many of them that are expected to be in the lineup next year. You're still talking, as of now, from what it seems, you can expect Vilardi, Byfield, and Turcotte, at least those 3 starting for Kings night 1. How does that make you feel? That has to be surreal. I would be absolutely ecstatic, truly.
Oh, it's damn, I hope this season starts in January.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what you do with Turcotte. I think this upcoming season is going to be a real cluster, because if it's a shortened season or if they jam all 82 games into, I know there's rumors of even.
It's not going to be ideal, however they portray
no.
it.
So, in terms of the younger players like a Turcotte, you say, hey, we want you in the AHL this year just to learn a little, or I think, because obviously I'll assume Byfield's the 3rd line center, unless something wacky happens. So then where do you put Turcotte?
It's tough. There's a part of me that feels like, I don't know, that they have to be toying with the wings here, because if Byfield shows out in camp, which I fully expect him to do, it would kind of be hard to justify having him on that 3rd line for long. As a Rangers fan, I've been thinking about, what are they going to do with Lafreniere, because the Rangers' left wing depth currently is kind of surreal, because they have obviously Kreider, then they have Panarin, and then you have Lafreniere. Okay, you're not going to boot down Kreider. You just put on extension to be a solidified 3rd liner when he's been on the top line for years. So how do you balance this? And, it's kind of tricky with prospects too, because you want to get the most out of them. Normally, to get the most out of them is to make them play their natural position. So then when you're asking them, okay, hey, we want you in the lineup, but in order to give you significant playing time and to help your development in our eyes, we need you to play, say, the off wing, or, just the wing in general. So the Kings are going to have to toy around. I expect them to kind of do a lot of different things next year with these guys, because that's just those 3. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Arthur Kaliyev, I don't believe he signed his ELC, but I'd have to imagine he's a guy that will definitely be in the lineup. If not next season, then for sure the following year. He's one that I wouldn't expect to see any time in the AHL unless he just really looks rough around the edges in camp. But again, I don't think that's going to be necessarily an issue.
Well, I mean, I think, just to start off, the first 2 lines are pretty set, on the Kings. It's obviously Kopitar, Brown, and Iafallo. Second line, which I kind of like this line, because is Vilardi, Frick, and Kempe.
That's a fun line.
I just love watching her. I mean, it'll be an entertaining line, I think, which, the Kings probably aren't going to make the playoffs next year. But they could. I think next year is going to be such a wacky scenario that they might
especially if they have expanded playoffs again for whatever reason. Who knows?
Yeah, if you take in any extenuating circumstances, you could see a team that is probably a year away, sneak in there. And then, so now you're down to the third line. Okay, we got Byfield. And then, there's Grundstrom maybe, is a guy you don't talk about much. But I really like him. Like, to me, he could be like our Thomas Holmstrom. He built just like the guy. He's a brick. But his NHL career so far is hit or miss. So you've got to deal with that, and
also don't forget too. And I'm expecting him to play sometime in the AHL next year. But at the same time, I'm surprised we didn't touch on this earlier because I just haven't bothered to mention it. But Elias Anderson, what's the story going to be with him? Like that. Well, I knew he was going to get dealt. He was clearly dealt to the Canes because I believe either his father or his uncle, there's someone of a family connection that works for the Canes organization. I think it has to do with their scouting. I could be wrong on that, but I know he has a relative that lives there.
No, I don't mean to cut you off. I think you're talking about Christian Ruutu, who's the Kings European scout.
Oh yeah, that probably is him.
And he's responsible for a lot of the European players the Kings have drafted the last couple of years because he's like their European guru over there.
And he's been starting a Swede movement, which I think is going to bode well for Elias too. I only wish Elias the best. I'm not going to get down in that whole ordeal. What happened with the Rangers? Things just didn't work out at the end of the day, and they need to trade him away at the right cost. They got a second-round pick for him, which was more than I thought they could get. So I was very pleased to see that happen. And now he goes into new scenery with LA with a great group of young guns and with some other guys, young Swedish guys, whether it's Helge Grans among other guys or Adrian Kempe, for instance, that have familiarity given that intellect as it is. So Elias, I think, could very well be in that roster. Probably you're just looking around in that bottom six, but he will be still given opportunities at both the center and the wing position because what do the Kings have to lose with him? It's basically, okay, give him some opportunities while we are in this rebuild, see if something good can come out of it. And I think there is definitely a chance for him to thrive there as soon as next season, should he in fact crack the roster.
Oh, absolutely. I see him, there's been some rumors that he might stay over there for one more year. Who knows? But you also have a guy like Austin Wagner, who they just signed for 2 more years. So he's clear. He's so fast, but he's, his hands are in question. His finish.
Carl Hagelin-esque.
Yo, absolutely. I'll lose some of your younger fans, but there was a player on the Kings in the mid to late '80s, Craig Johnson, who was so fast. Like he was, the Carl Hagelin of the late '80s for the Kings, and Mike Donnelly was another player on the Kings. They'd get 2-3 breakaways a game, and they literally looked like the puck was a hand grenade on their stick. So, he's an interesting. He's not a prospect anymore, but a player because he's kind of edgy too. Matt Luff is another player who. I think has shown some scoring ability at the NHL level. So he's, I think he's on the Kings watch list because they just signed him to a 1-year deal. So this is his probably make or break year for the Kings anyway.
Yep.
Trevor Moore is another player who's in the mix.
He's an interesting guy. He in my mind is definitely deserving of being in that bottom six in some form of capacity, and it's going to be interesting how the Canes are going to have a tough training camp. I don't think many people realize that. Like, they're going to have so many people competing in that bottom six, especially. You're going to have a lot of guys itching away. Trevor Moore really showed some flashes of brilliance during his time with Toronto. Hasn't played much with LA yet since that trade, but he is a guy that really, in the right opportunity, could bring you some solid depth in that forward group.
Oh, absolutely. And he was pretty edgy, too, from what I remember in his brief stint with the Kings. He was aggressive. So they have a lot of bottom six guys who on a bad team would probably be second line players. And they've got a few guys in the AHL who could, they're probably not going to be in the mix just because there's just too many prospects ahead of them. But it's going to be a great camp and the great thing about the Kings camp is they let you watch. I'm sure in like Toronto and Montreal you have to pay or they're private, but the Kings practices you can just walk into.
Oh, that's great.
No, it is pretty funny just to walk into a team's professional practice, so it's a very exciting time. I mean, because there's, like I brought up some of the drafts in previous years that I was excited about. There's only like one or two players you were excited about, like Dustin Brown, Aki Berg, and that's it. Dan Gratton, Craig Duncanson. It's like, well, if these prospects don't work out, we're effed. But now it's like, worst case scenario. Well, if Byfield doesn't work out, Turcotte will. If Turcotte doesn't work out, Madden will. Fagemo will. Thomas will. And we haven't even hit the defensive prospects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's a great spot to be in, and as a Rangers fan too, being fortunate enough to see them having some great prospects as well. Both these teams are in a spot where they can handle a scenario, obviously a worst case scenario, where you have, say, one or two, say, more of your more key prospects, whether they're your B+ or maybe A- that don't fully pan out, or at least reach the expectations in where they were selected in the draft, because of just how deep they are. And the Canes are in that prime spot now where they haven't really been in before, at least to my knowledge as a hockey fan to date. When you look at their team, how they were built in both 2012, 2014, yes, a lot of that was from great drafting, but a lot of those moves were also from key trades too. And Mike Richards isn't in the picture, if Jeff Carter isn't in the picture, if a couple of these other guys are in the picture, they wouldn't have been in the spot that they're in. So at the end of the day, it's okay that if, say, not all these guys pan out, because the Canes are in a position where they can surely handle that blow.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, King fans, we're a very fickle bunch. Like a lot of people come down hard on Dean Lombardi because the last couple moves he didn't work out. The Lucic trade, the Shakira trade, he was probably grasping for straws to keep it going, but, they don't remember his early trades and draft, got the Kings into position to win those cups. The Gabriel contract was horrific, but we don't win the cup in 2014 without him.
Exactly. And I love Gabby. And he was still, you guys were fortunate because literally the same thing with Columbus, where with both Jeff Carter and Gabriel, they have this short stint there and then they get traded off and then bam, like, they lucked out so hard that Columbus was not able to sustain their relationship with either one of those players, or didn't have the interest. That is crazy, just looking back on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but that was due to Lombardi just stockpiling draft picks and chess pieces, if you will. And, it was, but, the Kings paid the price for winning 2 cups, and I think people forget in the middle, they won 2012 and then the Hawks won in the middle.
Yep.
They were on pace to win that cup or had a chance to, but I think Stoll and Voynov got hurt. And it just really dampened their chances. I mean, if you could take away what Voynov did, all by just judging on ice, he was a huge part of those cup runs.
Voynov was fantastic. Not to cut you off, he really was. Like, it sucked that he had to go and do the things that he did and really ruin his career in the NHL, at least. But I before all that happened, I was a big fan of Voynov and his game. He was a very dynamic puck moving defenseman and really giving a good balance with him and Doughty.
Oh, absolutely. He was like the perfect second pairing defenseman, in some cases first pairing, and obviously what he did was horrible. So it's like hard to compliment the guy, but if you just stick with his on ice stuff, to lose him in that middle cup that Chicago won, it's like, damn, if he was healthy and we wouldn't have had to trade for Robin Regeer and not that Robin Regeer was bad, but like, that, and, his situation after the fact, you had to do a few moves, sign Sakara. It was a very domino-like situation. And I'm glad the Kings got rid of him, obviously, for what he did. But, I think Lombardi doesn't get the credit for, his first move he did when he was the Kings GM was to fire the massage guy. Like, he tore it down from the masseuse to the stick boy to, I think his first acquisition was Michael Handzus, and he gave him a 4-year, $16 million deal. And he had just been coming off an ACL surgery. And people are like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And he's like, hey, no one wants to play here. I got to bribe guys. But he's going to teach Kopitar how to play the 200-foot game. And that's exactly what happened. So,
yep.
And the whole point of this diatribe was to I guess, the differences between Rob Blake as a GM and Lombardi went for character guys in the draft. So he passed up a lot of skill guys to get that hard-working, lunch pail guy. Whereas Blake is like, no, I want a Kaliyev. I know he's got some issues with work ethic, but this guy scores goals. Lombardi never would have drafted Kaliyev. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to see Blake kind of, and he's probably in a better position than Lombardi was to, swing for the fences, which is what I loved about, their draft this year. Like that kid they picked up in the 5th round. His name is escaping me right now.
In this year's 5th round?
Yeah.
Why am I blanking? Because I know exactly who you're talking about too. Because I was watching the draft.
But he was a player slated for the 2nd round in and around the 2nd round, and because of perceived, maybe lazy issues, he went to the 5th. But that's definitely a player Lombardi never would. He's like, no, I want a guy who maybe has a 15 goal capacity, but he works hard. So
that reminds me of the Flames when they drafted defenseman Poirier in the later rounds, when he had arguably late 1st, early 2nd round potential. It's just, between his work ethic and his overall defensive game as a defenseman, there's definitely some issues there, but he has those raw skills and potential to be a dynamic puck-moving defenseman if he can round out his game. So why not take a flyer on him, especially if you can land him in, say, the 4th, 5th round? So that's how I look at it as well.
Oh, I mean, I remember wanting Kaliyev at where they picked up Bjorn for it. I'm like,
yep.
Outside of Cole Caulfield,
he was the best goal scorer. It baffled me. The fact that he fell out of that 1st round, I was livid. I was absolutely livid. I was like, no way. I was like, the Rangers, please just trade. Make a pick happen. Get this guy in the end of the 1st round because no one's going for him. And even with Caulfield, to an extent, given his size, because Caulfield's 5'7", so we're just going to undermine his play, right? That's why he drops to 15th to Montreal. It's like, I know that wasn't as much of a drop per se, but Caulfield was a top 5 talent. You can't tell me otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. I think if he's Kaliyev's size, he's probably in the top 5. But I mean, when you see a 17-year-old put up 50 goals, and it's not like this is the old days of the Q, when, Alexander Day, who was just the 1st round pick, like it was like the next Lemieux. He was putting up almost 200-point seasons. It's a lot. I think junior teams now across the board are almost play an NHL style game. It's better to defense than it was in the 80s and 90s. So, for a 17-year-old to put up 51 goals, I was like, wow, his attitude must be horrible if teams are passing on him.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I don't know the inside story to an extent, but I do know when you have a winger that has that pure offensive upside and say is lacking his defensive game, the last thing you do is pass up on a guy like him because he's young. You can work on his game. There's arguments that Patrick Laine isn't even that good of a player. I'm like, and what are you smoking? Like, I don't care how bad this guy is in his own end. He has youth on his side. And look, granted, could Laine, for instance, never pan out to be much of a defensively sound winger? Sure. But he's going to make up for it in the end with his offensive game. even with the NHL being so crucial and having guys that know how to play a 200-foot game, don't get me wrong, it's important. I'm a huge advocate for it. I love Mark Stone. He's like the best winger in the game in regards to that. But Kaliyev is in a spot where as long as you get the right development team in there, you know, things are going to be just fine. Like Cole Caulfield did not get drafted because of his defensive game. Cole Caulfield is never going to be a defensive guru, but he's going to put up the goals every night for you. Alexander Ovechkin is a prime example of that. Like, it's okay as long as they can make up for it because you have them purposely to be those impactful players. You don't need to worry about them, what they're going to do and say your own end the majority of the time. Patrick Kane, God forbid he does anything with back checking. Like, come on.
Well, I think, the only, like we were talking about Byfield earlier, and, really the only question mark is how will he handle the physical. Now he's going to be playing against men.
Yep.
The only, not problem, but the only concern I might have with Kaliyev is it's such a big difference between juniors and the NHL. I brought up a player by the name of the great Boko Imama, who's, I guess, the tough guy in the Kings system. People forget he had more goals his last year in junior than Nico Hischier. He had 41 goals his last year. And yet somehow it hasn't translated yet into the NHL or AHL.
And it may never. That's the tough reality for players, and that's why you got to make sure that, yes, you want to see your guys thrive early enough to the draft when they're doing great in juniors because that's the league they're playing in. But you do need to keep in the back of your mind that nothing is a given. There's so many guys that thrive in juniors especially. That's why to an extent, I'm saying this, unless they are purely dominant and, juniors in Canada, I really value guys that get some type of role as a teenager in parts of Europe. Even for Stützle's case, playing in what people would argue isn't as significant of a league in Dell, you can make that argument that it doesn't matter. This guy, at 18 years old, he broke their record with 0.82 points per game with 34 points in 41 games. Like, that is remarkable. Antoine Lundell, who got drafted by the Panthers, 28 points in just around 40 games, playing in league as an 18-year-old. Like, that is ridiculous. So I covet that to an extent more regarding a lot of players because they're actually going up against men. And when the Rangers drafted Filipino, for instance, in 2017 in the latter part of the first round, most Ranger fans were like, who the heck is this guy? And even I did, because he had no points. He literally had like just a couple points in a decent portion of games playing in Czech, but he was an 18-year-old playing in the men's Czech league. Like, that was huge. It's that kind of experience and that ability to be playing in these big leagues, even in a limited role, that tells you, hey, there's a good reason to view this guy as promising. So that's just kind of my personal stance on things regarding player development and how to evaluate them. But yeah, regarding juniors, it's great to see guys put up numbers, but nothing is a given at any level. But I think there's definitely more of an exception with juniors that, yeah, you need to make sure that you're wary of how they develop.
Well, it's just, the big differences, like we've talked about a few times already, is they're playing as men, and like, I remember, of course, I'm going to lose your younger fans because I want to talk about Alexander Daig, who was the first overall pick in 91.
We all know Daig.
I mean, he's one of those players that barely people your age will remember. But he put up Mario Lemieux type numbers in Hull. And I'll never forget watching a game with him where they're playing the Red Wings, Ottawa was, and Daig did the old dipsy doodle move, curl drag, and he tried to go around Steve Chason, who's no longer with us, but he was like a fifth or sixth defenseman back then. And he tried the same move 3 times. And you could see in Chason's face, he was laughing at him. He's like, dude, this ain't Hull. Like, I've seen this move 1,000 times. It's not going to work. So with, a guy like Kaliyev, like, I've watched a lot of tape on him, or YouTube. It's not tape. In juniors, it seems like no one guards him. Like, they just let him set up shop in the face-off dot. And whoever the center is just kind of gives a little chip pass, and he's got a Brett Hull like one time. Well, that's not going to happen in the NHL. Someone's going to be guarding him. and it's probably going to be a guy like a Ryan Reeves or someone, someone who he's never seen before.
Well, I think there is an exception to be had, just to mention this quick, because I get baffled by the same thing when I think about Alexander Ovechkin. This guy is planted in that left dot every minute of every second of every hour. And you're wondering, how is he able, after being in the league for as long as he is, to virtually be the same player in most aspects of his game? You know exactly what he's going to do in that left dot for the entirety of that power play or 5-on-5, and yet he still gets it off and it's still going in. It doesn't matter. You could be lined up perfectly and he's still going to go bar down on you. It's like, how is this happening? Why cannot we cover this guy? But the reality is that no matter how much these guys play in that dot and how predictable they are, the team as a defensive whole is still going to be focusing on the puck as well. They need to make sure that they're in the stick lanes, among other things. So they're going to be constantly moving. And when you have your winger like Kaliyev in that right dot with a left-handed shot on that power play, he's making just these little touches, these little movements that may not seem too significant, but that little touch, that little movement can be the crucial factor into why he's constantly being open. So it really is interesting just how superb goal scorers can be in that aspect where they're just locked in that dot for a majority of the time, but you just constantly see them kind of rotating around that offensive zone in that dot, but they're just making these subtle movements, and before you know it, say a defenseman gets caught for 1 second, bam, opening goal. It's those little things that really help differentiate a guy from being a certain type of player and being a bona fide goal scorer in the dot like Kaliyev now.
Oh yeah, I mean it's I just think that it's how these kids coming up from the junior system. I think it's more mental. Like that first shot that Kaliyev takes that would have gone in juniors, and say Darcy Kemper makes an easy save on it. It's like, oh wow, I didn't play against guys like him.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really, and they're 18. So I remember when I was 18 once, actually. And I didn't make the best decisions at 18 in terms of jobs and stuff. So I think it's more going to be interesting to how some of these prospects handle the mental playing against men. It's not going to be as easy anymore. You're going to have to work harder, so especially for a player like Kaliyev, who has that knock a little bit. Although I didn't see in the World Juniors, he seemed to be working pretty hard. But his playing time there was strange. He wasn't on the first line power play with Turcotte. So I thought that was, are his habits creeping up again? So it's, I love the mental part of the game too.
Oh yeah,
and
it's so crucial.
So much, there was another player in King history, and this is definitely doing a deep dive. His name was Pavel Rosa, and he was supposed to be our next Robitaille. He scored, I think, in his draft year, 152 points in Hull. Seems all these guys always play in Hull, these massive offensive number guys. And his first game as King, he scored 2 goals, and everyone's like, oh my God, this guy's going to score 60 goals. And I think a year or two later, he was playing in Germany because he had the mental, he wasn't mentally he had never not scored before. So, I can't wait to see, like we said, how Byfield handled his first big check against them. Kaliyev, the first easy save against them. And so, Cal Peterson, now he's a little more ready because he's played in the AHL already, but, now everyone in the NHL has a shot, Weber, Chara, there's 6-7 guys on every team who probably have a legit close to 100-mile-an-hour slap shot. So, it's always interesting to see how literally an 18 or 19-year-old processes all this.
Yeah, exactly right. And it really is a fascinating aspect to take into consideration because, if you're just looking at the score sheet, if you will, kind of being a casual when it comes to being a sports fan, it's easy to overlook the mental aspect of players. These guys are humans. They go through a lot. This is a tasking thing that they do. And while they're having fun doing it, it's still a job as well. So regardless of how talented they are, it takes such a mentally composed mind, and especially with hockey players. We know this story. It's so written off, it's so brushed under the carpet, if you will, when it comes to all the kind of tolls that they deal with between the injuries and, the substance abuse that they get into, and just the mentality of, as we've touched on before with guys like Theo Fleury and, any real NHL star, you normally have to leave your family at the early age of between 12 and 13 years of age for a significant period of time. That's not an easy commitment to do. Your complete mindset as a child is vastly different. You go into the real world, you're really basically put into military in a certain sense, where you're wired a certain way, and it can have a dramatic effect on your development just as a person, really composed. And hockey players are tough skinned. I think they are by far the toughest athletes in all of sports outside of actual physical sports like boxing and MMA, if you will. But they put their bodies on the line every single night, and it doesn't matter if they are, say, physically sound in the sense of being physical with fighting, but just what they do on a nightly basis for an 82 game season is nothing short of ridiculous, let alone doing that without your family around a lot of the times. So
it's almost uncalculable the what their brain must go through. Like, I saw Byfield getting interviewed, I think on the NHL Network, and they asked him, "Have you ever been to Los Angeles?" And it's like, no. And so I can't imagine that first time he gets off the plane and he's got to deal with LA traffic. Like, he's played in Sudbury, which is great, but I'm sure there's not a lot of traffic there.
No,
and like,
not to LA.
I'm sure he's never seen strip clubs on every block. I'm assuming he'll fly into LAX. There's like 7 strip clubs around the airport, and the temptation. I'm sure the first time he goes to the Comedy Store, hopefully, I guess he's too young to go there right now, but the first time he goes to any place on Sunset in Hollywood, he's like, wow, there's a good looking girl. There's another one. There's another one. And like, there might be 2 good looking, it's like stupid stuff like that you don't think about. And how will he handle it? And the other players, how will Kaliyev handle it? And, and like Drysdale and Anaheim, Anaheim's kind of a happening city. How will he handle it there? And, there's more things to do in Anaheim than just Disneyland.
Yeah, no, and that's all great points too. We see some players where we definitely get a feel where they're really feeling in with their environment. I think a prime example would be Austin Matthews in Toronto. He was really been an embodiment as to between the fashion, the personality, a lot of things in the sense of really just embracing certain aspects of what that city's about. But if we really look at hockey players and what kind of separates them from the rest, for the most part at least, is that they embrace the city, but they know their boundaries, at least more in today's NHL. I can't say the same about, the 80s and the early 90s NHL and before then, because I know all those stories, even regarding myself as a Rangers fan, between Messier and Richter. Like they did a lot of fun things, and times were different then, But nowadays, I feel like they're just so mentally composed to an extent where they're so driven to a point where they, for the most part, don't have an issue really making themselves an introvert from that actual reality of the big city that they're living in. There are a lot of players that don't venture out much at all in the city where they're living in, especially for the New York Rangers, like Capo Caco, for instance. I highly doubt this man is constantly stroaming around NYC. Like, it's a comfortability thing, and I think they don't really have much of an issue not overstepping their boundaries because they know that they're here for a bigger reason. I think their play is far more important than exactly their surroundings, and I think that is what's so great about hockey players out of the endless things that we've discussed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they know why they're in LA or New York or Toronto. Like, they're working. Like,
they're humble.
To us, it's a game. Oh, absolutely. And I think hockey players are just raised tougher.
Mm-hmm.
in the first year of the Kings got to the Stanley Cup in 92-93. I think Thomas Sandstrom played with a broken fibula.
It's
Like,
crazy.
Where you see a guy like, and I love basketball, but a player like Dwight Howard, if he sprains his pinky, he's out for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
They're just raised tougher.
It's a different mentality.
So,
It's no one's fault that this is just how they have produced the game. It's been so ingrained in exactly, the kind of style that they stand for. And don't get me wrong, the hockey culture has definitely overstepped its boundaries, and they're working on fixing those aspects where it has tolls on a player. And I'm very happy about that. But you still need those certain old school mentalities of really just being able to take the blunt, not taking necessarily something too seriously, or, when they get injured, yes, they heal up, but as long as they know that they aren't, say, necessarily in a life-threatening situation, they're willing to continue to put their body out on the line. Like, don't even get me started with playoff hockey. Like, it is remarkable what hockey players are able to do on a night-to-night basis. And something that always crosses my mind, quick, just to mention, I'm trying to think if it was Chris Kelly? No, it was another Boston Bruin, I believe, on the penalty kill a couple years ago. He blocks a slapper. Pretty sure he breaks his entire leg, like his entire femur, and he stays out for the remainder of that penalty kill when they didn't get out the entire time. And then he gets off the ice on his own. Like, it's stuff like that just is a perfect embodiment and example of what a true hockey player is, where they are willing to put themselves on the line, knowing that they're not going to hopefully be in a life-threatening situation because of how much they care and have a passion for the sport.
Oh, I mean, we could talk for the next 2 hours on plays that NHL players have made. I think it was either Couture or Pavelski of the Sharks that took a full slap shot to the, I don't know what kind of language I can say, to the middle region.
Yes.
And
yes.
2 seconds later, went down again to block another shot. Like, that's just, you kind of see that in football, baseball and, basketball, not so much. But I mean, to take an NHL slap shot to your thingy, and then go down again to block another shot, it's just mind-blowing to me.
I'm pretty sure there was an Edmonton Oiler over the past couple of years that blocked a slapper and it completely cracked his cup. He ended up being okay but it literally cracked his cup, like, entirely.
I mean, I can't imagine. I can't even fathom what that pain must have been like. But there's so many examples of. I was watching an old highlight reel the other day. I hate working out, but I do it every day. So I'm on my elliptical and I'm watching a Barry Beck highlight reel from early '80s. He took a slap shot to the head. He didn't wear a helmet.
It's crazy.
Didn't even get off the ice. Like, just, I think he cross-checked the guy next to him. It might have been his defensive partner. He was so out of it, but he didn't leave the ice. Like,
concussion protocol didn't exist.
Oh my God! I mean, you look at any NHL highlights on YouTube from the '80s.
Forget it.
There's one guy who made a Barry Beck highlight reel. It's about 9 minutes long. I think if you just look up Barry Beck highlights, and every single play he did was a penalty in today's standard. He was running guys. He was jumping off of his feet. No penalties were called on him. And so, but that's how, like, the Flyers won 2 cups in the 70s. It was pure intimidation. So it is kind of
bullies.
Yeah. And, I think Rob Zombie did a
yes, I know exactly.
documentary on the Flyers. But I'm bummed out. The only critique I had of that was and a lot of people don't realize this, what ended the Flyers dynasty. And this shows you how the physical play is different from today to, that era, is when Dave Schultz, he was the Bob Probert of his generation, got his ass handed to him by Clark Gillies of the Islanders. And then the Islanders, in my opinion, based off of one fight, won the next 4 cups because they had this feeling now of, we're not going to get pushed around anymore. because they had Clark Gillies. And so, but nowadays you don't see that. You see more team toughness, and guys like Tom Wilson being tough, and he's very tough. So it is, as a 52-year-old, it's been very interesting to see the style changes. You even brought up the Kings in 2012. They were kind of bringing back jungle hockey, if you will, like just beat them in the corners, elbow them, do whatever you have to do. And now it's gone back to guys like a Cole Caulfield or a Perfetti being able to be drafted in the first round and be able to succeed because it's not quite as physical anymore.
Yeah, exactly right. And playoff mentality brings a completely different aspect. Even when you have teams that are, say, more talently sound, like take Tampa for example. Tampa, it's an amazing team on paper, but they aren't known for their physicality, and they definitely showed it in playoffs. And that is what's so great about hockey as well. And I'm not going to go on that tangent, but just in a nutshell, playoff hockey is truly like no other. It'll make players that are not physical be some of the most physical guys you will ever see on the ice, and you would never expect it. But that's just because of how much and how hard they want to win, and they know what game needs to be played in order to get there. But I think when it comes to with everything that we discussed in this video, because I know that I'm going to want to touch with you in a separate video regarding more of that physical aspect of things and fighting. I'll save that for the other conversation. But I think as long as it's okay with you, we hit everything nail on the head regarding the Canes and basically what we believe is going to be their next face of the franchise in Quinton Byfield, with honorable mentions to the Alex Turcottes, the Arthur Kaliyevs, the Gabriel Vilardis, and even the Samuel Fagemos, who's a very underrated prospect in my opinion. All guys that are going to have drastic impacts for the LA Canes, but a lot of good reasons to be excited about the future as soon as the next season for them.
Oh, I mean, and we didn't even really get into their defensive depth that they have, or their goaltending depth. I mean, I guess if you were to pin maybe a possible weakness in their prospect pool is that they don't have the heir apparent to Drew Doughty, but there's also 30 other teams outside of maybe Colorado that don't have the next Drew Doughty. So, but they still have probably 4 to 5 solid, say 2 to 4 defensemen. So even that section of their prospect pool isn't bare. So and goaltending depth too, obviously you've got Quick to mentor Peterson.
Yeah, Peterson's solid.
Several other goalies, in the pipeline. So it's like King fans, it's really, I'm stuttering to contain my excitement because it's never been this stacked. And in this upcoming draft, which is supposed to be very defensively
it's going oriented. To be kind of the opposite of 2020 to say the least.
Yeah, I think they have, if I'm not mistaken, 8 or 9 more picks.
They have a good amount. They have multiple, I believe, second and third round picks.
Yeah, I think the only thing they're missing is a 7th round pick. So it's like it just keeps coming. So yeah, it's to wrap up my thoughts. It's I don't think it's outside of the 2 Stanley Cups. It's never been a more exciting time, not just for next year or 2 years. The next 10 years for Kings fans and the team it's looking pretty up.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. But seriously, thank you again so much, Earl. This has been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to doing the other video with you as well. But before I let you go, why don't you give a quick shout out to yourself where people can find you either on social media or where they can check out your podcast?
Well, this is the part I'm most uncomfortable with, is promoting myself. I'd rather promote the Barry Beck highlight reel, but if you go on Comedy Central, you can look up all my roast battles. Go to the Adult Swim, and stream the Jellies. I believe it's free. And my podcast is called Inappropriate Earl, and people ask me what it's about. It's really the podcast that's about everything and nothing at the same time. I had hockey players on. I've had porn stars on. I've had singers from my favorite 80s groups on, a lot of comics on. And so please check that out. And if you like it, subscribe it, review it.
Awesome. All right. Well, seriously, thank you again, Earl. This has been a pleasure. I look forward to the other video with you. But thank you so much, and you have a good rest of your night.
Oh, thank you. The honor was all mine, man. Like I said, I don't watch many YouTube hockey videos when they're prognosticating on teams' prospects and other things that aren't involving a fight from the 80s. And you do an amazing job.
Oh, well, that's a huge pleasure. So seriously, thank you again. All right, Earl, I'll talk to you soon.
You got it.
All right, guys, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you so much again to Earl for coming on the channel. This was such a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting someone, especially of his hierarchy, really, to be so interested in talking about not just hockey, but his favorite team in the LA Kings. I'm really looking forward to the other video, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking about things regarding the NHL and fighting and really what has happened with it, the evolution of it probably, and why it isn't so current in today's NHL and our thoughts on that. But seriously, thank you all so much for checking out. If you enjoyed this video, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Quinton Byfield is for sure going to be that next face of the franchise for the LA Kings, or do you think maybe Turcotte, maybe Fagemo, maybe Kaliyev, maybe other guys too, whether it's Vilardi or even to an extent Madden, but probably not having a chance to be that face over Byfield down the road? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And again, check out previous videos. It means a ton, guys. Awesome video. I hope you enjoyed. I know that this was probably a little bit more of a podcast format as we discuss various things regarding not just hockey overall, but different aspects, if you will, things. But seriously, I really appreciate all you guys so much. Hit like, hit subscribe if you enjoy this kind of hockey content, and I'll catch you guys real soon.